top of the watershed up here in the woods. There's about 3 acres of woods that forms the top of the watershed. And I've been putting in a woods road and just moving mushroom logs around and dug these holes actually about 4 years ago. And that's enough disturbance to actually create some silty water here. And so that's not ideal. The forest itself above us should not be moving any soil in a 1 or 2 inch rain event. Let's walk down the property and we'll see what it's like as we go down about 200 feet in elevation down the 10 acres of the property and see if we're moving more or less soil. So that should be interesting. So this is actually really neat. These are brand new earthworks. They're only about a week and a half old. We're trying to just experiment with beds at the top of the watershed to grow a variety of plants besides rice, which we're having successful growing in constructed wetlands. And it's really neat. There's no silt coming from up there down into here. And this is still not fully stabilized. And we just got probably a hard 1.5 inches of rain in the last 10 hours. It's basically rained on and off most of the time, hard rain for the whole day, and it's the end of the day now. And you can see this is what earthworks look like when they're brand new. We've seeded heavily, mulched, and then seeded probably 2 or 3 more times. And this is all mostly white clover, as well as ladino clover, red clover, yellow blossom sweet clover, thousands of clover seeds to stabilize these soils and start to fix nitrogen and build soil. So this is all coming from the forest above. And we're making it travel a far distance now instead of running straight down the slope like it was doing before. We're making it do a lot for the site and for the ecosystems on the property. So let's follow it all the way down. Okay, so now we're at the top largest pond. The first place that we store a lot of water on the surface in this micro watershed that we're working with of this 10-acre site. So that stores about 10 to 15,000 gallons of water. And that's the first place we have the opportunity to really catch and filter out sediment and hold that sediment and soil in the landscape and not allow it to go to the river, which is moving just today even and yesterday, millions of tons of soil just from 2 inches of rain that we got yesterday out the Mad River into the Winooski, into Lake Champlain. And that's what Lake Champlain is doing for Vermont, is filtering out those sediments. We're doing that filtering throughout the site in a dozen places on 10 acres. This is the overflow from that top pond. 5 years ago we constructed the water course, and then about 4 years ago we tuned it up and added these check dams out of small stones, as you can see right here. So we're creating essentially little in-stream drop pools. There's many of them. There's probably about 20 or 30 in here as this small seasonal stream drops about 30 feet. And then we bring it across the slope in a keyline approach, where we start making this water go from its original path of about 1,000 feet to about 5,000 feet, about a mile before it leaves the property. So this is interesting. We're actually there's active earthworks happening in this landscape right now, yet it's still clear after a heavy 1.5 inches of rain or 2 inches today. Here's a kind of micro scale version of what's further downhill on the property. We have large swales. These are, I call them micro swales. And so here's water that's being retained, slowed before it moves downhill in each of these little swale berms. We're growing currants. These things are loaded with black currants, serviceberry, cherry, and we move it to elderberry as we go down here, and more currants. So this is an ideal situation. We have heavily mulched mounds with water slowed and stopped on site. So we're getting the fertility of this rain event into our soils. These plants get to feed on them. They love being in this situation. They can get all the water they need, but they're not inundated. Seaberry swale mounds here for a second. Here's new earthworks. These are terraces The terraces are one end of the spectrum of earthworks that we're using. So it's really terraces, swales, paddies, ponds, as far as amount of water retention. This retains water in the soil only, whereas those other three features actually hold water in a visible form. All this water is groundwater that we're holding here. And you can see this is all brand new earthworks, but when done carefully, we can revegetate it very quickly. This is all clover, turnip, daikon, and lots of other good soil building plants growing up. This should be totally green in 3 weeks and ready to be grazed in, maybe with some luck weather-wise, we'll graze this in 6 weeks or 7, 8 weeks. And then we'll really have started a new succession of very valuable soil building ecology. Take a look this way to the seaberry swales. And here the rain has not been hard enough to see any visible water in these swales on the top side of all these seaberries, except a few spots. In here, you can see there's some visible water. But otherwise, we've infiltrated it, and this is bedrock, right here. This is actually straight up bedrock. This is amazing. I didn't realize this actually, that the bedrock was this close to the surface, literally at the surface, over so much of this site until we dug these swales. This is all bedrock right here. So all these plants are just growing on a thin layer of subsoil mounded up with bedrock in between them, exposed. So really, it's a good example of what's really going on here, which is that we're farming water before we're farming soil. And I've always been a big fan of the mantra, you know, it all starts and ends with the soil. It's all about the soil, which is true, except it's actually all about the water first and about the soil next. It is all about the soil, but the water first and foremost. And the quality of the water and the way the water is managed begets the quality of the soil and then the quality of the plants on site. And here you can see standing water in above this hazelnut hedge here that catches all the water as it's moving down this slope. All being filtered through this soil on top of bedrock. So this is an example of extreme infiltration attempts, and it's working. We're on bedrock, but the water is going through what little soil we have to the bedrock and slowly moving through the matrix of roots, feeding these plants. And these hazelnuts are doing very, very well on essentially what is subsoil and bedrock, because we're slowly filtering water through their roots, past their roots. And that's all filtering water for the whole watershed. So here are almost brand new earthworks in the form of swales. They'll tend to stay dry because this is a very dry, actually very steep. It's probably about 25% grade here, part of the land. It's one of the steepest parts of the property that's not actually in cliff. And this is all planted as a micro vineyard. These are all different varieties of cold hardy grapes. We did this about 3 weeks ago now. And so they were dug, seeded with an array of soil building plants, and then mulched. And you can see already this is getting pretty darn green. There's radish coming up, turnip, clover, all our favorite plants are coming up in here, our favorite ground cover plants. And the top is nicely mulched. And so all of this is slowing water as it moves down this hillside here and infiltrating. You can see on the far side of this where some water is actually pooling. So you can see as we move further down now, an area of less disturbance, which is this really sorry beat up pasture that we're trying to renovate. So here's the middle pond. This is an example of holding a lot of water. We're holding about 15 to 20,000 gallons of water. Comes into here on the surface, gives a residence time. Silt can settle out if there is any silt, which is almost none now because things are established. And then it gives us fish habitat, swimming opportunities, microclimate opportunities to extend our growing season for the gardens around the pond. all of this water, and all of the water indeed coming across the property, on the upper half of the property, is actually successfully put into the ground in the bottom half of the property. As we go this way, we can see the overflow from this pond going to a drop pool here, where it's another opportunity to disperse energy, so we don't have erosive forces. We have as little erosive forces as possible. It's also beautiful and is a great soundscape, and there's more opportunity for animals to live. And then we actually have brand new earthworks over here in the form of patties. And notice it runs totally across slope instead of downslope. It used to run straight downhill through where these patties are. So interestingly enough, we had essentially a seasonal stream flowing downhill straight through what is now a series of constructed edible wetlands, which are rice paddies. This thrives. All these systems, you can feel the system thriving when we get rain, and almost the more rain we get, the more it thrives. So here we are now, pretty much at the bottom of the property. Crystal clear water in the swales here. Dead horizontal across the slope, holding all the water that comes into and infiltrating it. A little bit of water is overflowing out these swales and reaching the next series of swales. And then there's one more series of swales and then a pond at the bottom. And here we have elderberry growing. And this is one of the reasons, because we have a mile of these swales now on this part of the property, this is one of the reasons why this farm actually benefited from Tropical Storm Irene. We got over 6 inches of rain, yet we didn't move any soil. The bottom water systems on this farm was totally crystal clear at the tail end of Irene. So we weren't moving any soil even in a 6+ inch rain event, because of all the water embracing systems we have. I mean, these swales, ponds, paddies, and terraces all embrace and actually leverage the water coming into the site. They make use of it. So we benefit from huge rain events, or even very little rain events, because we capture all of it. So whether it's a small rain event or a big one, we're making use of every drop possible, even if it's a little amount or if it's 6 inches.